Welcome to part 2 of my conversation about the Andy Griffith Show with author and expert Randy Turner. Who's your favorite character? And then who is one of your favorite characters that maybe people would find as a surprise?
I mean, obviously everybody loves the main character, so I'm not going to count Barney and Andy there, and obviously Ron Howard. I would have to say that Jim Nabors as Gomer Pyle in Mayberry, his own show was fine, but on that show he was very funny. And for somebody, he's not an actor. You know, Andy Griffith discovered him. He was performing in a nightclub, and my understanding of his act would be he would talk in that strong Southern accent. He really was from Alabama, and would talk in an accent, but then of course when he would sing, the lower tone, you know, hard to come out of the same mouth. But I just, he's got a lot of great lines. For a character not seen as often, I would probably have to say Briscoe Darling. My goodness, if you look at the number of lines he has, the percentage of them that are just, you know, quotable lines, it's just almost everything he says is so funny. You know, I just think he's hilarious. Denver Pyle is certainly a great actor. You know, he's a dramatic actor too. But you know, I know like when Ernest T. Bass, when he first came down to complain about him, and Andy said, "Can't you and your voice handle him?" He said, like, "Well, I thought about killing him, and I hated to go that far." You know, just constantly. That would probably be the character that is not seen as often, but that I'm really fond of. Yeah.
Oh, what a great choice!
Yeah.
And such a unique character.
Yeah.
You know, he just always his attitude toward everything is so.
Yeah. He's, you know, and part of another thing about the show that I really like, they had the Dillards hired to play the Darling Boys. And of course, they're a legendary, initially bluegrass band, and they were really proponents of what came to be called newgrass, because they eventually added drums, and the Eagles, a lot of bands count them as a big influence on them because of the Southern rock kind of thing. And Rodney Dillard's still performing. He always comes to Mayberry Days. Very, very nice man. But those characters and Charlene and certainly Briscoe, you know, if you look at them the wrong way, you could think, well, they're calling them hillbillies, or they don't use the term hillbillies, but you know, they're these mountain people. But the difference, and again, my family liked the Beverly Hillbillies when I was a kid. You know, we certainly saw it. My family's all from Appalachia. As an adult, when I went back and saw that, you know, first episode of the Beverly Hillbillies, it's like, man, you know, it's pretty offensive if you're from that area. Now, my parents, I guess, were okay with it because they were from the area. Well, they were from the Ozarks in the show. My parents were from Eastern Kentucky. But, you know, it's pretty broad.
Yeah.
But the Andy Griffith Show treats them, even though, yeah, they are stereotypes, they're treated with respect.
They
you know,
sure
like
are.
they're not used to be made fun of. I mean, it is funny. All the boys have very blank expressions. Andy will look at them and goes, "Boy, the boys, they seem awful talkative today." They're all keyed up, you know. They just are all staring, slack.
Right.
I never felt like they were making fun of those people. Where on other shows, yeah, they kind of were, and they, you know. But yeah, the Andy Griffith Show seemed to be treated with respect. And the other thing that people don't realize now, because, well, we live in a different world at this point, but at that time, bluegrass music was still very much a regional thing. And I will give credit to the Beverly Hillbillies as well, but those two shows really brought bluegrass to the masses. It exposed a lot more people to that type of music that I don't think, it was much more of a regional thing up to that point. So it did give them wide exposure.
And it really helped, of course, that Andy Griffith himself was a musician and played the guitar and always joined in with them. That was always so neat, I thought.
Yeah, Andy was a very good instrumentalist. You know, he learned to play the trombone when he was a young man, and they said by the time within just a year or two, he could play pretty much any brass instrument, and had learned to play the banjo as well and guitar. And yeah, he's a good singer, right? One of his early albums, he makes some joke. I don't think he uses in the show, but you know, something to the effect where I may not be good, but I'm loud. You know, but really of course, he eventually won a Grammy for a gospel album when he was older. And yeah, he clearly, that love of music was something that Andy Griffith himself clearly had and wanted in the show.
And like everything, it's all in balance. All the great shows, all the elements are in balance. Nothing's overdone. So that I think that's part of it too. And the Darlings are certainly not overused. Maybe if they had been in it more often, it would be, the joke would wear thin. But
I think you're exactly right. That same reason, the same Ernest T. Bass, he only had 5 episodes. That's about as much as you could do because he was a very over-the-top character. I know, Howard Morris eventually came back and directed something for them as well. So often he would direct 2 episodes, then he would appear in an episode, and he would direct 2 more. And I know that one of the first times he came in, it was a parody of My Fair Lady, and it was Ernest T. Bass and Andy trying to pass him off as as more of a gentleman. He's in a party, and when he gets found out, they have to drag him out. And Howard Morris said he told Andy Griffith and Don Knotts that I'm going to do my best to not go out of that doorway. And you can see if you watch it closely, Andy Griffith's having a hard time not starting to laugh at the end. He's hanging onto the door jam. It's a very physical comedy, and that's not really what the Andy Griffith show normally was. There wasn't that much. I Love Lucy was known for the physical stuff. Andy Griffith didn't have a lot of that, but Ernest T. Bass was an exception. Very animated. Howard Morris was awesome.
Yeah, quite the talent for sure. In front of and behind the camera, both. Yeah, and again, that's wonderful. They had ways to bring in physical comedy without overdoing it. So many great elements. But yeah, like you mentioned earlier, kind of more of a quiet show, a gentle show that's very, very, I'm sure, to go back to everything you were saying earlier, it's one reason its appeal continues. People just like to relax with it. And it's more than an escapism. It's a gentle visit, even if the world is not if that world is not real. It's very real in the show and very real to us.
They didn't. I don't think they ever said, "Let's try to have a strong moral But there is, in fact, kind of a moral lesson each time. There are churches that use the show, as a kind of a Sunday school thing, and it's. But I think because of the show being based on people caring for one another, I don't think it was too difficult to have that happen. But pretty much every episode, there's some message you could take from it, but it's never Andy being preachy.
Yeah.
Or by seeing what happened and how they treated one another, as opposed to turning to the camera. And I remember, kids, it's not that at all. It's subtle, but it's always got a nice message to it.
Right. And you can kind of think about it and savor it and discover it for yourself and continue on repeated viewings to discover new layers and come back to it at different ages. It's one thing when you're a little kid and watching it later, and maybe when you're a parent, it has another layer of meaning.
Well, the example I always use is Opie the Birdman, where Opie pulls a baby bird, not a baby bird, the mother bird, by accident with a slingshot. I'm going to insert one thing here I think you might enjoy, and hopefully people will. Talk about what a great actor Ron Howard was. In the first episode with the new housekeeper, there's a scene where he's saying his prayers at bed before he goes to bed. And it hurts Andy's feelings because he doesn't mention her. But one of the things he thanks God for is his dog, Gulliver. Well, Ron Howard actually had a dog named Gulliver. And eventually, unfortunately, the dog got hit by a car and died. So when Ron Howard had to hold that bird and come up with the tears, his father told him to think about how you felt about Gulliver. And Ron Howard said, those were real tears. That wasn't, so he put saline solution in my eyes. He was really crying, And it's just wonderfully moving. But if you're a parent, when you're younger and you see that, and he's got the 3 little birds he raises, and by then they're flapping around the cages, and he realizes it's time to let them go. When you're young, that means one thing. But when you're a parent, and you've got kids that you eventually let go, it is a very different meaning. It's really very, like you said, it can mean different things to the same person at different times in their lives.
Yeah. And earlier I said it's not real, but what I meant was the setting. The characters are real and the emotions are real.
Absolutely.
So that's really all you need. And the combination of the writing and the acting and the setting, it's just is just a thing of beauty. It really is.
It holds up. I mean, if you watch it now, it's as funny now as it was then, and you can't say that about all shows, but it really does.
Yeah, I agree. And you had mentioned earlier, certainly, about Ron Howard and how important he was to the show and the character of Opie. And I think you were the one that pointed out to me, and I had never realized this, that tell our audience what's special about the first episode of every season.
Yeah, the first episode of every season is always centered on Opie. It always has a storyline that involves Opie. Now, when the show initially, Rance Howard and this Gene, they were a little bit concerned about Ron Howard doing something like this because it's a commitment. And Sheldon Leonard assured them, this isn't like Leave It to Beaver or Dennis the Menace. He'll be an important part of the show, but he will not every episode will center around him. He'll even occasionally get some episodes off. And so that's one of the reasons they let him go ahead and do that. So initially, they actually debated about making the first episode The Manhunt, which is actually the second episode, where the state police come to Mayberry, and they're very dismissive of Andy, the small town sheriff, and I'm sure you've got chicken thieves you can attend to while we do the important stuff. But of course, Andy's inherent goodness and common sense went out in the end. And they debated about showing that episode first because they thought that was a theme that was going to be developing through. But the sponsors, apparently, General Foods was insistent it be the one with it, where Frances Bobby appears as Aunt Bee. But she does appear in that second episode, but they could have edited it out so easily. She's just in it very briefly. And maybe they realized, I don't know if it was good luck or they just realized it was the right thing to do, but they didn't always film it first.
Yeah.
But what aired first was always an episode that was about Opie. Mr. McBeady. I mean, there's a lot of classic ones, and they're always Opie-centric episodes to start the season.
Yeah, well, it's fine with me because as people that saw my video know, I am a big fan of his and do think he's so important to the show. So he's certainly one of my favorite characters. I think the character that I would choose that might surprise people would be Howard Sprague.
Howard does not get enough credit, I don't think. Partially because of being in the color of years. I love Howard. Howard Sprague appeared at the very end of the sixth season, initially kind of more as a tryout, as a different character. He was an insurance adjuster. But he came back and he was the county clerk, which I believe is the name of the episode that introduced him. And he was the county clerk in Mayberry. And he was brought in as Howard McNear got older, who played Floyd. He was still used a lot, but his health wasn't great. And they were always, and of course, Don Knotts was gone. So they were always looking for new comic talent to bring in. So they pretty much had to rely on, I don't mean had to, they relied on Floyd and Goober as the two kind of mainstays. And Howard came in, was very much the milquetoast tied to his mother's apron strings, wouldn't do anything without mother's permission. I would add, by the way, which I think is interesting, that the character, who knows who actually created the character, but who gave life to it, one of the writers is Bill Idelson. And Bill was an actor as well, and the role most people know him from as far as an adult is he was Sally's boyfriend on the Dick Van Dyke Show, who was also very much a milquetoast. And so he helped create that
that's
character.
true. That's true.
Jack Dawson, I think, did a fantastic job with that.
Yeah,
so, he was the time in the spinoff Mayberry RFD.
And a different kind of character for the show, which impresses me, that they had the sense to bring a whole new dimension. And a more opportunity for us to see Andy as very accepting and very respectful, even sometimes when others would poke fun at Howard a little bit, like when he wanted to go fishing and, oh, come on, he doesn't know anything about it, and he's like, oh, it'll be fine, we'll help him. And it's really fun fun to see it. And I think those are some of the best episodes, the one where he catches you would know the names of all the
legendary fish that people have been trying to catch forever.
Yeah. It's real. The episode starts one way and then goes in a completely different direction. There's really most of these are kind of centered on 3 acts anyhow, but that's one where you can really see it because each act is a little different and you don't necessarily see any of that coming. So I really enjoy the depth of that, and I also enjoy that Opie seems to really like him. He helps him come up with the jokes for his comedy act. To me, he's a fun character and probably one I can relate to because I can't fish or bowl or do any of those things. So
He bowl. Yeah, I loved the bowling episode. It was great. Yeah, you're right. And like I said, I realize in retrospect, though, they're not as strong, but they had their merits. I think they're definitely worth watching. And I think if you're a fan of the show, you should be watching them.
I was trying to remember how you and I even really got to know each other. I mean, obviously it was through social media, but how do you recall how this all started? Were we actually connecting?
I don't know. I don't know if I recall real distinctly though. I was following your stuff early on because you had posted something, and I think maybe I may have just seen your profile picture. Might have been a picture from Sleeping Beauty or something, whatever. And I followed it, and I realized, oh, this guy's written a lot about Disney. And I just started reading your blog and watching your stuff, and got to know you that way. And then you were kind enough to comment quite a bit and react. I thought, well, you're clearly actually a fan of the Andy Griffith Show as well. And I think, I'm not really sure how I reached out to you initially, but I know I was working on a book.
Yeah.
But I kind of knew you a little bit before then, I
Yes.
think. But were very kind to help me get some information I needed about Francis Bavier. And yeah, I don't know. I really hope to get to meet you in person someday. I really am a big fan of your podcast and your writings. I will say, you talked about the inscriptions I put in your book. I bought your most recent, I don't know if it's still, but beautiful book, a Disney book, and you were kind enough to autograph it for me. And I don't have it in front of me, but part of the inscription was, surely Walt Disney must have been a fan of a Mayberry film as well. And I love that. So.
Oh, he had to have been. I think he would eat it up. Yeah. So, well, thank you for all that, and I'm glad we connected. And that reminds me to ask you about how your writing for about Mayberry started, because if I remember correctly, it started with sort of the idea of what became the calendar, right?
Yeah, but that wasn't in my head at the time. Yes. So I have a friend of mine named Barry Sullivan, and we formed a Facebook group called the Gomer and Goober Pile Comic Book Literary Guild, kind of a mouthful. And I went to the Mayberry Days in 2016, and I've been thinking about maybe doing this. And I just decided to set a goal to myself to see if in the year 2017, if I could post every day, and not just a random fact, but something tied to that date. And that can get hard to do because a certain part of the year you've got TV episodes, and the episodes of the show aired. And of course there are birth dates and that kind of thing too, but to do a full year of it. But when I did that, I didn't post, and I ended up, instead of posting a fact, I would try to post every fact I could find related to that day. So sometimes the posts would be very lengthy because I would have 8 different things I mentioned that happened on that day. And other days, nothing. You'd have to be, it's National Pickle Day, or you have to, call it this as a fun way to kind of celebrate the show. And then I had the idea of doing a calendar, but instead, there's already a wall calendar that they've been making for years. It's just pictures.
Yeah.
I'd speak calendar, but it's, pictures of the show. But this is more every day there's a fact about the show. And as you said, it's really to celebrate everybody involved with the show. So it's not trivia. It's sometimes talking about a background actor or, an actor that, did whatever. And Dixie Griffith, in fact, was kind enough. She wrote a little blurb from my calendar 2 years ago on the front cover that said something to the effect of, my dad would have loved this, but it celebrates everybody because they all contributed to the show. It's not just the stars. And then from there, I had the idea of doing the book. And I didn't want to just write a book about the Andy Griffith Show. Jim Clark, who was the man who founded the Andy Griffith Show Rerun Watchers Club, he and Ken Beck, a journalist, wrote several books about the Andy Griffith Show. Richard Kelly wrote the seminal book about the Andy Griffith Show. So I kind of thought, that's been done. And they actually got to meet a lot of the cast members. I've met some, but, I'm talking 30 years ago they were doing this. And they're great books. I'm not going to try to redo something that they're already great. They still exist. So the Mayberry First, the concept of that book is I don't just list the first time that something happened. For example, the first time Andy is seen smoking. I use it as a springboard to talk about more than that. You know, why did he stop smoking, and you know that just things like that. Instead of it's not just a list of here's the first thing that happened. That'd be kind of interesting, but
Yeah.
you know, to a degree. And then the 60 years, October the 3rd of last year, was the 60th anniversary of the show. But of course, we're still in the 60th year right now.
Yeah.
Because of COVID, I kind of feel like we're celebrating it, you know, certainly until October 3rd this year, but maybe past that a little bit.
Yeah. Why not?
Last year. And there I just approached people who were involved with the show. Bruce Bilson, who was the assistant director the first 2 seasons. Leroy McNeese, who's a member of the Bluegrass Hall of Fame, but he's in the Country Boys, which is a bluegrass band that appeared on a couple of episodes of the first season. And just various people, just as a way to celebrate the show. And I don't know, it's just a way to share my love of it. And it's just something I really enjoy doing.
Well, it shows. And your method of using something as a springboard, I think that's one reason I really responded to, and I remember reading that every day when you were putting on the Facebook group and looking forward to it, because I knew it was going to be very rich. And that's the way I like to do things too. I like to layer things, especially since so many of the Disney subjects too have been so well covered. I like to, if I have to say something that's been said before, I like to say something else as well. So you do it so masterfully, and that's what makes it so enjoyable to me.
Yeah, I try to give some extra insight, you know, and a lot of times it's things that if people thought about it, maybe they would realize, but they just haven't thought about it that way. And
right,
you know, it's just interesting to me. And again, I think it's a show worthy of being celebrated. I've had the opportunity to meet. I mentioned Eleanor Donahue. I've, met a number of the cast members. Ron Howard's little brother, Clint, he comes to Mayberry Days. Really a sweet man. I mean, just very nice. He's one of those people that, you know, he at least gives you the impression that if you didn't say there are other people who are waiting to get your autograph, he'd sit there and talk with you for 20 minutes about things. You know?
Yeah.
And just, you know, it's just a great opportunity to get to do that. You know, and a lot of people won't be here forever, and I think it's just a fun thing to do. And one of the things in the magazine, in fact, is I always list 10 cast members, even if they're only on a single episode, but 10 cast members that are still with us. I certainly want to memorialize people that we've lost, obviously, but there's still a pretty good number of people that were on the show that are still around. And I think it's fun to try to celebrate that too and call attention to that. So,
I mean, one reason I do like the whole Howard family thing is they're a Burbank family, and I'm in Burbank. And it's just fun to know Clint still lives in Burbank, and I understand he still lives in the house that they grew up in. So
it is. I think his house he grew up in afterwards. But when, of course, Clint was so young, he appeared on the Andy Griffith Show as Leon, a little cowboy with a peanut butter sandwich. No thanks, Leon. But he was too young to remember that. You know, he remembers General Ben, obviously, but he doesn't remember that because he was so young. But when they were filming the Andy Griffith Show, they actually rented a house on the corner by what is now Red Studios. But they were. He literally just walked across the street and he was at work. Opie was.
They were smart. They were very smart to do that.
And I think they did, and they didn't live there their entire careers, obviously. But yeah, he's a very part of what I like about Clint and Ron both. They seem like they've got their head on straight. You know,
yeah.
Somebody that could have a big head and think they're above things. And I've never had the impression for either one of those men that they feel that way. They just seem like genuinely nice men.
Yeah,
I've never met Howard, but I mean, just in everything I've read about him, and that's something I've always enjoyed about them. Right,
that is definitely his reputation, and it's been his reputation his whole life, as that TV Guide article I showed, proves. As a teenager, he had just turned 20, actually, when they wrote that article. And that's sort of the point of the article. They were marveling at, like, this can't be. He can't be for real. But he was, and he is. Talking about this in-depth information that you have at your fingertips at all times, maybe you could tell one or two, or maybe three, examples of Andy Griffith Show cast members or what have you that have a Disney connection, because of course for my YouTube channel, so many of the people watching have a great interest in Disney.
Yeah, there are a lot, but I've been doing some research into it, and there's actually even more than I realized. Because, there are some that you think of automatically, I think. The most common example for most people, well, there are two, but Margaret Carey appeared in just a couple of small roles. She plays a very similar character both times, that they're actually different characters. But in the first season episode of Christmas Story, actually it's just Christmas Story, there's no A. Her husband, the great actor Sam Edwards, who had such a career on radio, it's ridiculous. But Sam Edwards sits there, and she's the wife. And she again appears later on in an episode called Andy Forecloses. Very similar characters, and again, Sam Edwards, her husband, but they're different characters. But when they made Peter Pan, she was the live model that they filmed. They filmed her for like 6 months. That they animated Tinkerbell to. They didn't rotoscope it, you know what I mean? But they would use it as a reference. And so there are pictures of Margaret Carey in front of a large piece of wire shaped like a keyhole. She's peeking through it. And I know I've known Margaret fairly well, and I've seen her many times talk about when she auditioned. She stamped her foot. She was upset about something, and you can see, Tina did that. You can really see her personality in a lot of it. But they filmed her for like 6 months to do that. And she was on the Andy Griffith Show. The traveling salesman, Burt Miller, was played by Sterling Holloway. I'm always amazed that some people don't realize he was the voice of Winnie the Pooh. It's like, how can you not tell that that's Winnie the Pooh's voice? His voice is so distinctive.
So distinctive, yes.
It really is. And the last one I'll mention is way more obscure, and it's one you helped me with. But Frances Bavier, they did not film her like they did with Margaret Carey, but they brought her in to take some photographs. They used her as a reference when they did Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather of in Sleeping Beauty for the three fairies. She was a photo reference. And actually, Cheerio Meredith, who was Emma Brand or Emma Watson, depending on the episode, the hypochondriac that lived in Mayberry for the first season and a half, she was also brought in to do that. But you were able to help me actually get the date that Frances Bavier was there. That's going to be in a future book. But yeah, they're countless. Ron Howard appeared in Smoke, which was a made-for-Disney, TV movie that got released theatrically in England. And they almost domino, because in that show, his younger sister was played by Pamela Ferdin, and I've been talking about it in the magazine. Yeah. And she is in one of the color episodes. It's actually the episode that introduced Warren as the replacement for Don Knotts, one of the very few missteps the series took, which was not its fault, by the way. I always just feel bad that
I know
people are so. It's not Jack Byrne's fault. He was doing what he was hired to do. The writers just were not writing him as a new character. But she's in that episode as a Corliss, a little girl that's upset that her mom is in jail because of Jack's very much Barney Fife-ish overzealousness.
Yes.
But yeah, they're just been amazed, and there's so many. I'm actually going to be doing a presentation fairly soon on this, and I hope I can find enough to talk about it. It's already become very clear. Well, I'm going to have to just leave out a ton of stuff. There's a ton. The other one I'll mention is when the beautiful and wonderful Betty Lynn was cast as Thelma Lou as a recurring character. She was not a regular. She only appeared like half a dozen times in any given season. She seemed like she was there more because they would refer to her a lot. There you go. She was actually under contract with Disney. She was on Texas John Slaughter, played the marshal's wife. And they let her go do this at the same time. I think that that series isn't ready to end. But she was literally under contract with Disney when she was brought onto the Andy Griffith Show. So it just keeps going and going. And there's a lot. I mentioned Clint Howard earlier. Clint was Rue and Kanga and Rue, and So there's just tons of them.
Yeah, it's great, and I love peeling it all back and finding all the connections, and it's just endlessly fascinating, and the way things intersect.
And you see that a lot too, because there was a certain core of those actors, and there's a lot of people in the Andy Griffith shows that had wonderful careers, what we now call old time radio, And in fact, Sheldon Leonard, played a racetrack, lout. Lout was the term they used, where he, trying to get Jack Benny to come over, buy something from him. And Sheldon Leonard appeared. I'm having a mental block on the name of the series, but the band director on the series was O.P. Cates, and O.P. Cates also appeared in later episodes of Lum and Abner. Andy Hirth was a big fan, and that's where the O.P. got his name. It's named after O.P. Cates. And Lum and Abner, that's a show not as many people are familiar with anymore, but it's an old-time radio show.
Yeah, it's great.
If you're a fan of the show and you listen to that, you will enjoy it. It's very much, they're simpler than Andy for sure, but they're good people that want to do good by their fellow man, and it's very uplifting. But they're just little 15-minute segments every time. It's really fun. It's a great show.
Yeah, I listened to one the other day. I am a big fan of old time radio. Just love it. What a great art form, and again, a showcase for all these character actors. I really have to pay attention at the end when they say who the cast is, because a lot of times you're not going to know, because they could be so different in each episode.
Well, on Lum and Abner, those two actors did multiple voices. They would not only be the main characters; they do a lot of the other voices too. And then a lot of times there's a story arc on Lum and Abner where somebody's going to come and make a film in Pine Ridge, and they change the town because they're so excited that they're going to be making a film there, and they use that exact same plot in Mayberry Goes Hollywood. They introduced Howard McNear as Floyd. But yeah, it's just there's not enough hours in the day.
Yeah.
The classic entertainment. Again, I like a lot of new stuff too, but boy, it is really fun stuff.
Yeah, same here. I just really enjoy it, and it's one for the ages. It is a classic, and for anybody watching who hasn't seen, it's hard to imagine anybody, but maybe some of our younger viewers haven't had a chance to catch it. I would especially recommend getting the DVDs, where at least most of the episodes are intact, as you were saying earlier, Randy. It's wonderful that entities like MeTV will show it, but so cut up, and even worse, I think, sped up to cram in more commercials.
Yeah.
That's an okay introduction, but
no, I know. I still think that the MeTV airs it in TV land. I'm not knocking that.
Right.
That's great. But yeah, if you want to see the whole episode without, like you said, speeding up, taking out gaps, and the closing music doesn't quite sound right because it's a little bit higher speed, Yeah, the Amazon Prime, some of the ones are intact, but there are some that are edited, but they're edited on the DVDs as well. So
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Amazon Prime again, because I don't tend to think of that, and that's so easy for most people because, of course, it is streaming, and you can just pick and choose and watch. Very easy to watch them. Streaming's great, and it is certainly some of the classic shows are on there. It's great to catch.
That CBS Viacom just launched a new thing called Pluto TV. I don't know if you're familiar with this yet.
Yeah.
It literally has a channel. It's like what all the Griffith Show fans have always said. I wish it was a channel that just showed nothing but Andy Griffith. They have channels to do that. It's just Andy Griffith, it's just the Beverly Hillbillies. Now, when you get used to streaming, you miss that. I can't pause it or it's like watching television. But on the other hand, it's just one more avenue where people can access Mayberry goodness, as I like to say.
Well, this is an endlessly fascinating subject, and your books and the Ambassador Program are great ways to continue and enhance that enjoyment of the show itself. First of all, I hope you will come back again at some point in the future. We would love to have you on again and talk more about this.
I would love, anytime you want, I would be happy to do it.
Well, great. And I would love sometime to hear you present in person and be one of your actual presentations, especially
right back at you.
Especially if it was in Marceline. What could be better than that? But remind everyone how they can find your books and how they can find out information about joining the Andy Griffith Show Ambassador program.
The easiest way is just to go to Mayberry Books. It's plural with an S, mayberrybooks.com. I'm on Instagram at Mayberry Books. And, you'll find contact. I've got email there, and that's the easiest way to try to get a hold of me. My phone number is on there. Give me a call. Happy to talk show anytime. But yeah, that's probably the easiest way for people to do that. I mean, the books are available other places, obviously, but especially if they want the book signed.
I would also recommend everyone check out your Facebook group, which you'll have to remind. I know the title, but I don't want to bungle it.
No, it is a mouthful. It's the Gomer and Goober Pyle Comic Book Literary Guild. So
I love
when
it.
we just did it as a joke, my friend Barry and I, and I cannot tell you the number of people that have said, I like Gomer and Goober, but I really like all the characters. Like, no, it's about all the characters. They're like, I didn't know they did comic books about. No, it's not. It's just meant to be a little bit of a joke. It's a nice group because we worked really hard. There were some groups, and I belong to these other groups, but there are some groups that have 30,000 people. But when you look at it, you go, well, are these people actually fans? They sometimes will say certain things. I've turned down more people a week than I let in, for sure. I ask some basic questions, and we also really don't put up with too much shenanigans. If somebody puts something real inappropriate, I just take them out of the group. So it really is I think it's a pretty safe area to enjoy the show, and no politics in it. It's just people that love the show.
I do hope that everyone will check out your books, and especially the new one. What is the title again?
The Mayberry Travel Guide.
The Mayberry Travel Guide. Check it out, and check out the Ambassadors program for sure, because I really enjoy it in that magazine. It's just tops. So once again, Randy, thank you for being here, and hopefully we'll see you again in the future. I'd like to thank everyone for watching, and please join us again for another VIP visit.